The acceptance letter trembled in my hands, not from joy, from rage. We regret to inform you that your scholarship has been awarded to another candidate due to administrative review of your application materials. Administrative review. What a clean phrase for theft. I stood in the university mailroom, my chest burning like someone had poured acid directly onto my heart. Around me, students laughed and chatted, their voices blurring into white noise. My vision tunneled on those typed words, that corporate sympathy that meant nothing. Nancy had taken it. My sister. My own blood. The scholarship I'd worked 4 years to earn. The research grant with Professor Davidson that would have launched my career in molecular biology. The future I'd sacrificed everything for, gone, handed to her like a gift at Christmas. My phone buzzed. A text from Mother. Nancy got the Davidson scholarship. We're so proud. Family dinner tonight to celebrate. Be happy for your sister, Eleanor. Be happy. Be happy. I wanted to scream. Instead, I felt something cold slide down my spine, settling in my stomach like ice. The trembling stopped. My hands went perfectly still. I'd spent my entire childhood being told to be happy for Nancy. Happy when she got the lead in the school play I'd auditioned for. Happy when she dated the boy who'd asked me to prom first. Happy when my parents paid for her art supplies while I worked 2 jobs to afford my textbooks. But this was different. She hadn't just taken an opportunity. She'd stolen my research, my thesis, my interview notes with Professor Davidson. I'd left them at home during spring break. Foolish, trusting. And she'd copied everything. Repackaged my work under her name. And they'd believed her. I walked out of the mailroom into the autumn sunlight. Leaves crunched under my feet. The world looked exactly the same as it had 5 minutes ago, but something fundamental had shifted inside me. I wasn't going to that dinner. I wasn't going to smile and congratulate her. I was going to burn it all down. Eleanor, you need to let this go. Professor Raymond adjusted his glasses, looking at me with that practiced sympathy professors reserve for students having breakdowns in their office. I'd come to him hoping for help, for advocacy, for something. I should have known better. She submitted your preliminary research as her own, I said, keeping my voice level, despite the fury clawing up my throat. I have drafts time-stamped months before her application. Email chains, my lab notebook. It's your word against hers. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. And frankly, Eleanor, Nancy's presentation was exceptional. Her interview was flawless. Even if your claims have merit, the committee won't overturn their decision based on circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence, my work reduced to a technicality. She's your sister, he continued, his tone gentling like I was a child who needed comfort. Family disputes happen, but you're both talented. You'll find other opportunities. Other opportunities. As if they grew on trees. As if I hadn't spent every waking moment for 4 years building toward this one chance. Thank you for your time, Professor, I said. My voice came out flat. Empty. I stood, gathered my bag, and walked out of his office without looking back. In the hallway, I pulled out my phone, ignored 17 messages from my family, opened my email instead. One new message sat at the top of my inbox, sent just minutes ago. From International Molecular Biology Institute, Berlin. Subject, your research proposal, accelerated doctoral program. My finger hovered over it. I'd submitted this application 6 months ago, before everything fell apart, before Nancy's betrayal. It had been a backup plan, something I'd barely let myself hope for because the acceptance rate was less than 2%. I opened it, read the first line, then read it again. Dear Miss Eleanor Whitmore, we are pleased to offer you full acceptance into our 5-year accelerated doctoral program with complete funding and access to our premier research facilities. A laugh bubbled up from my chest. Not happy, not relieved. Dark. They wanted me in Berlin. They wanted my research, my mind, my dedication, and they were offering me something better than any scholarship at this provincial university could ever provide. I looked back at Professor Raymond's closed door, thought about Nancy, probably shopping for a celebration dress right now, thought about my parents, already planning how to show off their gifted daughter to their friends. They had no idea what they'd done. They'd set me free. The family dinner was exactly as awful as I'd imagined. Nancy sat at the head of the table, my usual seat, wearing a dress I recognised. The blue one I'd bought for my own scholarship interview last year. She'd borrowed it and never returned it. Now she wore it like a crown. "Eleanor!" Mother's voice was bright, forcibly cheerful. "Finally! We've been waiting!" I set my bag down by the door, didn't take off my coat. The dining room fell silent. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Mother, father, Nancy and her boyfriend, James, my Aunt Rita, and my grandmother. Nancy smiled. That sweet, innocent smile she'd perfected over 23 years. "I'm so glad you came. I know this must be hard for you, but I'm leaving," I said. The words dropped into the silence like stones into water. Father frowned. "Leaving? Eleanor, sit down. Your sister worked hard for this achievement, and you're going to be respectful." "I'm leaving for Berlin," I continued, my voice cutting through his. "In 2 weeks. I've been accepted to the International Molecular Biology Institute's doctoral program. Full funding. 5 years. Nancy's smile froze. Actually froze, like someone had paused a video. Mother's fork clattered against her plate. "Berlin? Eleanor, that's... You can't just..." "I can." I pulled the acceptance letter from my bag. I'd printed it, brought it as evidence, as proof, as a weapon. I laid it on the table between the wine glasses and the roasted chicken. They want me. My research. My work. My eyes locked on Nancy's. Her face had gone pale, that porcelain complexion she was so proud of now looking sickly in the candlelight. "The scholarship you took," I said softly. "It would have been nice, but this is better, so thank you, Nancy. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are." "Eleanor, that's enough." Father's voice had gone cold, authoritative, the tone he used when he expected immediate obedience. "You're being dramatic and cruel. Apologise to your sister." I laughed, actually laughed. "Apologise? For what? For telling the truth?" I picked up the letter, folded it carefully, and put it back in my bag. "I won't be at Sunday dinners anymore. I won't be available for holidays. Don't call me. Don't write. Don't pretend you care." Grandmother spoke for the first time, her voice thin and worried. "Eleanor, sweetheart, you're upset. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about." I turned toward the door, then paused. Looked back at Nancy one more time. She sat frozen in my dress, in my seat with my stolen scholarship, and her eyes were wide with something that might have been fear. "Good. Enjoy everything you took from me," I said. "I hope it keeps you warm at night." I walked out, didn't slam the door, just closed it softly behind me. In my car, I sat in the darkness for a long moment, my hands steady on the steering wheel. My phone was already buzzing with angry texts, but I didn't look at them. I'd meant every word. They were dead to me now. Berlin was rain and stone and bitter coffee. I loved it immediately. The institute was everything the acceptance letter had promised. Cutting-edge labs, brilliant colleagues, professors who actually cared about research over politics. I threw myself into my work with a ferocity that surprised even me. 18-hour days, 20-hour days. I barely slept. My apartment was a studio on the 4th floor of a converted building near the Spree. Small, austere, with a single window overlooking the river. I'd wake at 5, run along the water's edge as the city stirred to life, then arrive at the lab by 6:30. Most mornings I was the first one there. At night, in my tiny apartment, I'd lie awake and think about Nancy. Wonder if she was struggling with coursework she didn't understand, research she'd stolen but couldn't replicate. Wonder if she lay awake too, suffocating under the weight of maintaining a lie. I hoped she was drowning. The first months were brutal. Not the work, I thrived on that. But the isolation. Berlin was a city of millions, and I knew no one. My German was passable but clumsy. I ate alone, studied alone, existed in a bubble of my own creation. My phone would light up occasionally with messages from home, mother mostly. Long paragraphs about how I was tearing the family apart, how Nancy cried every night, how I needed to forgive and move forward. I deleted them without reading past the first line. Dr. Helena Winters, my primary advisor, called me into her office 6 months into the program. Her office smelled like old books and bergamot tea, walls lined with awards and publications that spoke to decades of excellence. Your work is exceptional, she said without preamble. Germans were refreshingly direct. Unprecedented for a first-year doctoral candidate, I'm recommending you for early advancement. Early advancement. I'd heard of it, a rare path where exceptional students could complete their doctorate in 3 years instead of 5. Only the most brilliant candidates were ever considered. If you maintain this trajectory, you could defend your dissertation in 2.5 years. She studied me over her reading glasses, her gaze sharp and assessing. Though I wonder at the cost. You're here every night, weekends, holidays. I've never seen you at departmental social events. This pace isn't sustainable, Eleanor. I'm fine, I said. The words came out automatic, reflexive. I was fine. I had to be fine. Fine meant focused. Fine meant productive. Fine meant I wasn't thinking about the hole in my chest where my family used to be. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. Germans respected boundaries, and I was grateful for that. There's something else. Professor Davidson from your undergraduate university contacted me. He wants to know if you'd be interested in contributing to a collaborative research project. My blood went cold. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Professor Davidson? Yes, apparently one of his scholarship recipients is struggling significantly. He's looking for additional expertise. Helena's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes were sharp, watching my reaction. The student's name is Nancy Whitmore, your sister, I believe. The universe had a cruel sense of humour. I could see it so clearly. Davidson in his office, reviewing Nancy's failing work, realising she was in over her head. And instead of failing her, instead of acknowledging his mistake in choosing her over me, he wanted to bring me in to clean up the mess. He wanted me to save her again. Tell him no, I said. My voice was ice. Helena leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. May I speak candidly? Please. When you arrived here, I did some research called Colleagues at Your Former Institution. I know what happened with the scholarship. I know your sister claimed your work as her own. She paused. I also know that Professor Davidson was one of the committee members who awarded it to her. My jaw clenched. I hadn't known that detail. Hadn't wanted to know. You came here carrying a tremendous amount of anger, Helena continued, and you've channeled it brilliantly into your work. But Eleanor, this anger you carry, it will either fuel you or destroy you. Make sure you know which. I walked out of her office with my hands clenched into fists, her words echoing in my skull. Fuel or destroy. Fuel or destroy. Nancy was struggling. Of course she was. She'd stolen work she didn't understand, claimed expertise she didn't possess. 5 years into the program that should have been mine, and she was failing. Probably desperate, probably terrified. And now Professor Davidson, the same man who dismissed my evidence, who told me to let it go, who'd chosen her polished presentation over my proven track record, wanted me to save her. The irony was delicious. But more than that, it was instructive. I pulled out my phone and composed an email to Davidson. Short, professional, devastating. Professor Davidson, Dr. Winters informed me of your request. I must respectfully decline. My research schedule is quite full, and I'm afraid I don't have time for collaborative projects at this moment. I'm sure Miss Whitmore will find the resources she needs. Best regards, Eleanor Whitmore. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I went back to the lab and worked until 3 a.m. The next 18 months passed in a blur of research, writing, and revision. I published my first paper in Nature, a coup for any doctoral candidate, nearly unheard of for a second year. My second paper followed 6 months later in Cell. My third was accepted by Science. I became known in the field. Eleanor Whitmore, the prodigy from Berlin, the one to watch. Professors started seeking me out at conferences. Job offers began arriving before I'd even defended my dissertation. Department heads wanted to know my timeline, my requirements, my salary expectations. I was 26 years old and I was winning. At night, alone in my apartment, I'd sometimes open my laptop and search Nancy's name. Find her listed on the university website as a graduate student. No publications, no awards, no conference presentations, just her name, hanging on by a thread. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt empty. Helena's words haunted me. Make sure you know which. Was I being fueled, or was I being consumed? I didn't have an answer. Wasn't sure I wanted one. 2.5 years later, I stood in front of a mirror in a Berlin hotel room, adjusting my collar. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore. The title still felt new, sharp-edged and powerful. I defended my dissertation 3 months ago to a standing ovation. The examining committee had called it groundbreaking. One professor had actually used the word brilliant. 4 papers in top-tier journals, 17 citations already. A research profile that people twice my age would envy. I'd received 3 job offers from prestigious universities within a week of defending. I'd accepted the one from my old school. The position had appeared like fate. Assistant Professor of Molecular Biology. Tenure track. The youngest faculty member in the department's history. A position that reported directly to Professor Davidson's research group, the same group Nancy had joined with her stolen scholarship. When I'd emailed to accept, I'd felt something cold and satisfied settle in my stomach. Some people might call what I was doing petty, vindictive, a waste of my talents and potential. I called it justice. My phone buzzed. A text from Helena. Are you sure about this? Revenge is expensive. It costs more than money. It costs time, energy, pieces of yourself you won't get back. I typed back, this isn't revenge, this is justice. Though we both knew I was lying. Helena had tried to talk me out of accepting the position, had pointed out that I could go anywhere. MIT, Stanford, Cambridge. Why go back to the place that had rejected me? Why put myself in proximity to the people who'd hurt me? Because I wanted them to see what they'd missed, I told her. Because I wanted them to know what they'd lost. Because I wanted Nancy to look me in the eye and realise that stealing from me had been the biggest mistake of her pathetic life. The flight to the States was long, giving me too much time to think. I'd been gone for nearly 3 years. 3 years of silence from my family after I'd made it clear I wanted nothing to do with them. 3 years of building myself into someone new, someone harder, someone forged in the fire of betrayal. I wondered if they'd changed at all. Probably not. The university looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown larger, fuller, more substantial. Students hurried across the quad, backpacks heavy, faces as young and uncertain. They looked like children to me now. I'd been one of them once, eager, hopeful, naive enough to trust that hard work and merit would be enough. Now, I was something else entirely. The science building was exactly as I'd left it. Same worn linoleum floors, same smell of chemicals and old coffee, same bulletin boards covered in fading announcements and research opportunities. But I walk those halls differently now, head high, shoulders back. The click of my heels echoed with authority I'd earned. The faculty meeting was scheduled for 10. I arrived at 9:30, walked through the familiar halls and stopped outside the conference room. Through the small window in the door, I could see them gathering. Professor Raymond, who'd dismissed my evidence against Nancy. He was older now, his hair greyer, his shoulders more stooped. Professor Davidson, who'd awarded Nancy my scholarship, still commanding the room with his presence, still holding court like the academic royalty he believed himself to be. Dr. Patricia Chen, the department chair. I'd never interacted with her much as an undergraduate, but I'd researched her thoroughly before accepting this position. Published researcher, fair-minded administrator, someone who valued results over politics. And there, sitting near the back, wearing a cardigan that had seen better days. Nancy. My sister looked tired. No, exhausted. The kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from months or years of struggling just to stay afloat. She'd lost weight. Too much weight. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands fidgeted with a pen, clicking it repeatedly in that nervous habit she'd had since childhood. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. No makeup. The spark that had always made her the centre of attention. Gone. 5 years of the scholarship. She'd somehow made it through her undergraduate degree, though from what I'd quietly learned through colleagues and professional networks, it had been brutal. Barely passing grades. Research that went nowhere. She was now a graduate student, supposedly working on her master's thesis, but from what I could gather, she had no thesis project. No advisor who wanted to work with her. No prospects. She was drowning, just as I'd imagined all those nights in Berlin. I watched her through the window for a long moment, expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, satisfied. Instead, I felt nothing. No, that wasn't quite true. I felt cold, clinical, like I was observing a specimen under a microscope. I opened the door and walked in. The room's chatter died immediately. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. Every head turned toward me. Professor Davidson looked up first, recognition flickering across his face like a candle flame. Then shock. His mouth actually fell open slightly. Dr. Whitmore? His voice carried disbelief. I didn't realize. You're the new faculty member. I am. I set my bag down at the head of the table, moved to the front of the room with practiced confidence. Thank you all for the warm welcome. I'm looking forward to working with each of you. I could feel the tension in the room. Raymond was staring at me like I was a ghost. Davidson looked between me and his papers, clearly scrambling to process this development. Dr. Chen was watching with interest, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. My gaze swept across the room, deliberately skipping over Nancy. Not yet. Let her wait. Let her wonder. Let the anticipation build until it was almost unbearable. As some of you may know, I continued, pulling out my laptop and connecting it to the projector. My research focuses on cellular regeneration and genetic markers for disease resistance. I've published 4 papers in the last 3 years, and I'm currently developing a new research program that I hope will become a cornerstone of this department's work. My first slide appeared. My publications, my accomplishments, my credibility laid out in stark, undeniable terms. Someone in the back, a professor I didn't recognise, whistled softly. I'll be taking on graduate students this semester, I said, letting my words settle over the room like snow. I believe we have some promising candidates. Now I looked at her, made direct eye contact, watched the blood drain from Nancy's face like someone had opened a valve. Her pen clattered to the table. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. For 5 years, I'd imagined this moment, dreamed about it, refined it in my mind until it was perfect. I thought I would feel powerful, unstoppable, like a queen returning to reclaim her throne. Instead, I just felt tired. But I smiled anyway, small, cold, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "It's good to be home," I said. My first lecture was scheduled for the following Monday. Advanced Molecular Biology, a required course for all graduate students in the program. Nancy would be there. I arrived early, wrote my name on the board in clear, precise letters. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore. Watched as students filed in, their faces curious, nervous, eager. Nancy entered last. She had lost more weight, I noticed. Her cheekbones were sharp, her collarbones prominent. The blue dress, my blue dress, hung loose on her frame now. She'd kept wearing it all these years, like a trophy, like a reminder of her victory. She saw me, froze in the doorway. For a moment, I thought she might run, turn around and flee and never come back. But she didn't. She walked to a seat in the back row, her movements stiff and mechanical. "Good morning," I said, addressing the class. My voice was steady, professional, cold. "Welcome to Advanced Molecular Biology. This course will challenge you. It will push you beyond what you think you're capable of. Some of you will excel." My eyes found Nancy's. "Some of you will fail." I distributed the syllabus. 30 pages of dense requirements, reading lists, research expectations. Several students visibly blanched. "Your first assignment," I continued, "is to present your current research to the class. 10 minutes, next week. I want to understand what you're working on, where you're struggling, and whether you have what it takes to continue in this program." A hand went up. "Professor, what if we don't have a research project yet?" "Then you'll need to develop a proposal by next week. Use your preliminary interests, your undergraduate thesis, anything that demonstrates your capability for independent research." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. This is graduate school. If you can't think critically and work independently, you don't belong here. The class was silent. I glanced at the roster, ran my finger down the list. "Miss Whitmore, Nancy Whitmore, you'll present first." Her face went absolutely white. "Professor, I'm not sure I'm ready." "You've been in this program for 5 years. My voice was pleasant, conversational, lethal. "Surely you have something to show for it." The other students were watching now, sensing blood in the water. Nancy's mouth opened, closed. My research I've been exploring." "Then explore it in your presentation," I said. "Next Monday, 10 a.m, don't be late." I turned back to the board, began writing the week's learning objectives, and didn't look at her again. But I could feel her panic, could taste it in the air like copper. 5 years ago, she'd taken everything from me. Now I would take everything from her, and I would do it slowly. Monday arrived wrapped in cold rain. Nancy was already in the classroom when I entered, sitting in the front row now. She'd dressed carefully, professional blazer, neat hair, minimal makeup, trying to look competent, confident. She looked terrified. The other students filed in, taking their seats, pulling out notebooks and laptops. The energy in the room was tense. First presentations were always brutal, but having to present to a professor who clearly had no patience for mediocrity, that was next-level stress. "Miss Whitmore," I said, not bothering with pleasantries, "you're up." She stood, her movements jerky, walked to the front, connected her laptop to the projector with shaking hands. The first slide appeared: "Genetic markers in cellular regeneration, a 5-year study." My 5-year study. The research she'd stolen. the work that had gotten her the scholarship. A cold smile touched my lips. "Whenever you're ready," I said. Nancy began speaking. Her voice was thin, uncertain. She talked about methodology, about preliminary findings, about future directions. All of it vague. All of it surface level. All of it, I realised with growing satisfaction, completely hollow. She didn't understand any of it. She'd memorised my research well enough to get the scholarship, but she'd never actually learned the science behind it, never grasped the foundational concepts. For 5 years, she'd been faking her way through, probably relying on other students, on professors who gave her the benefit of the doubt, on her charm and her pretty face and her ability to smile and nod and pretend. But you couldn't pretend your way through a doctoral programme. Not forever. I let her talk for exactly 7 minutes. Then I raised my hand. She stopped mid-sentence. "Miss Whitmore," I said, "can you explain the mechanism by which the genetic markers you've identified actually influence cellular regeneration?" Silence. It's... the markers bind to what? The cellular structures. What structures? Be specific. Her face was flushed now, red creeping up her neck. "I don't have that information in front of me." "You've been studying this for 5 years. You should be able to explain the basic mechanisms without notes." I stood, walked to the board. "Let me help you. The markers you're discussing, where's the original research that identified them?" More silence. I wrote a citation on the board. My citation, from my undergraduate thesis, the one she'd stolen. "This paper," I said softly, "published 6 years ago, undergraduate research by..." I paused. Let the moment stretch. "Eleanor Whitmore. Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" The classroom was absolutely silent now. Nancy's eyes were wide, panicked. That research was publicly available. It was my preliminary thesis, submitted to Professor Davidson. I turned to face her fully. "Tell me, Miss Whitmore, how did you gain access to unpublished undergraduate research?" I didn't. Because, from where I'm standing, it appears you've built your entire graduate career on work you didn't do. Research you didn't conduct. Ideas you didn't generate. My voice was still calm, still professional. But every word was a blade. "That's called academic fraud." A student in the back row gasped. Nancy's hands were trembling violently now. "Professor, please!" "Sit down," I said. She didn't move. "Sit down." She collapsed into her chair like a puppet with cut strings. I addressed the class. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. Academic integrity isn't optional. It's not something you can fake or smooth talk your way around. Your research must be your own. Your ideas must be earned." I looked directly at Nancy. "And if you've built your career on lies, eventually someone will notice." The rest of the class passed in a blur. Other students presented. I offered feedback, asked questions, but my mind was elsewhere. Nancy sat frozen in her chair, staring at nothing. When class ended, everyone filed out quickly. Except Nancy. She approached my desk slowly, like she was walking to her execution. "Eleanor," she whispered, "please, can we talk?" I gathered my materials, put them in my bag. Didn't look at her. "Dr. Whitmore," I said. "In this setting, you call me Dr. Whitmore." "Dr. Whitmore." Her voice broke. "I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. But please, don't destroy my life over this. I've worked so hard." That made me look up. "You've worked hard?" I laughed, and it was a bitter sound. "Nancy, you haven't worked a day in your life. You stole, you cheated, you took everything I built and you wore it like a costume." I leaned forward. "And now the costume doesn't fit anymore, does it?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "What do you want from me?" I considered the question. What did I want? I wanted her to suffer. to feel every ounce of pain and humiliation and rage that I'd felt. I wanted her to know what it was like to lose everything. But more than that, I wanted her to understand that actions have consequences. "I want you to withdraw from the program," I said quietly. "What? No, I can't." "You can. You will. Or I will bring formal academic misconduct charges against you. I have evidence, timestamped drafts, email chains, my entire undergraduate thesis with notes and methodology that predate your application by months." I tilted my head. "Your choice. Withdraw quietly or be expelled in disgrace." Nancy's face crumpled. "Eleanor, please. I'm your sister." "No," I said. "You stopped being my sister the day you stole from me." I walked past her, out of the classroom, into the hallway. Behind me, I heard her crying. I didn't look back. Epilogue. 6 months later. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I opened it in my office, surrounded by research papers and grant applications, and the comfortable chaos of academic work I loved. My office was small, but mine, a window overlooking the quad, bookshelves already filling with journals and reference texts, a desk that stayed perpetually cluttered with the detritus of active research. The envelope was plain white, no return address, but I recognised Nancy's handwriting immediately. For a moment, I considered throwing it away unread. Then I opened it. "Dear Dr. Whitmore, I'm writing to apologise, not because I expect forgiveness. I don't deserve that, but because you deserve to know that I understand what I did to you was unforgivable. When I took your research, I told myself it wasn't really stealing. We were sisters. We shared everything. What was yours was mine, right? I convinced myself you'd be fine, that you'd find another opportunity, that it didn't really matter. I was wrong about everything. I've spent 5 years drowning in work I didn't understand, faking knowledge I didn't have, terrified every single day that someone would realise I was a fraud. And someone did realise. You realised. Of course you did. It was your work all along. I withdrew from the programme like you demanded, moved back home. Mum and Dad don't understand why, and I can't tell them the truth. How do you tell your parents that you destroyed your sister's life and then got destroyed in return? I'm working as a lab technician now. Basic work, pipetting samples, running tests other people design, following protocols I don't need to understand. It's humbling. It's probably what I deserve. I think about you every day. Wonder if you think about me. Wonder if you ever feel guilty for what you did to me in that classroom, in front of everyone. Then I remember what I did to you first, and I realise you don't owe me guilt. You don't owe me anything. I hope you're happy, Eleanor. I hope Berlin was worth it. I hope being right feels as good as you thought it would. I hope someday you can forgive me, even though I know I'll never forgive myself. Nancy. I read the whole thing twice, folded it carefully, placed it in my desk drawer next to a photograph from my dissertation defence, me in academic regalia, Helena beaming beside me, the weight of my achievement visible in my smile. Then I pulled out a piece of departmental letterhead and began to write. Nancy, I received your letter. I appreciate the apology, though you're right, it doesn't change anything. You asked if I think about you? The answer is yes. I thought about you every single day in Berlin, every morning when I woke up at 5 to run along the Spree, every night when I worked until midnight in the lab, every time I published a paper or presented at a conference or received recognition for my research. I thought about you, and it fueled me. But here's what you need to understand. You didn't destroy my life. You set me free. If you hadn't stolen that scholarship, I would have stayed here. I would have worked with Professor Davidson, published decent research, probably gotten a good job at a good university. I would have been fine. Successful, even. But I wouldn't have been extraordinary. Berlin made me extraordinary. Betrayal made me extraordinary. You made me extraordinary. So, thank you, Nancy. Thank you for showing me exactly who you were. Thank you for teaching me that the only person I can truly rely on is myself. Thank you for giving me the anger that powered 3 years of the most productive work of my life. You asked if being right feels as good as I thought it would. It feels better. Not because I hurt you, though I won't pretend that wasn't satisfying, but because I proved something to myself, that I don't need family support or institutional backing or anyone's approval to succeed. I just need my own mind, my own work, my own relentless refusal to give up. You're working as a lab tech now. That's honest work, and there's no shame in it. Maybe, for the first time in your life, you're doing something you've actually earned. As for forgiveness, I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. But I don't think about you with rage anymore. Mostly, I don't think about you at all. And that, Nancy, is the truest form of moving on. I hope you find peace with who you are. I hope you learn to build something real, something that's actually yours. I hope someday you understand that taking shortcuts only leads to dead ends. But whether you do or don't, it's not my concern anymore. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore. I sealed the letter, addressed it, walked it down to the mailroom myself and dropped it in the outgoing bin. Then I went back to my office and back to work. Outside my window, students crossed the quad, their futures bright and uncertain ahead of them. I had 3 graduate students now, brilliant, hard-working, honest students who earned every success. We were working on a new project, expanding my dissertation research into clinical applications. Early results were promising, revolutionary even. Next month, I was presenting our preliminary findings at an international conference. The month after that, submitting another paper to Nature, and my career was taking off. My life was exactly what I'd built it to be. My phone buzzed, a text from Helena in Berlin. "How's the revenge going?" I smiled, typed back, "It's not revenge anymore. It's just my life." And it was true. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about Nancy, stopped being about what she'd taken from me. It had become about what I'd built in the aftermath, the career I'd earned, the respect I'd commanded, the future I'd created entirely on my own terms. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. "Dr. Whitmore?" One of my graduate students, Timothy, poked his head in, young, eager, intimidatingly smart. "Do you have a few minutes to look at these results? I think we might have something." Of course. I gestured him in, cleared space on my desk for his laptop. He showed me graphs, data sets, preliminary analyses that made my pulse quicken with the thrill of discovery. This was it. This was what I'd worked for. Not revenge, not vindication, just the pure, clean satisfaction of doing excellent work. "This is exceptional, Timothy," I said, studying the numbers. "Write it up, and we'll discuss including it in the conference presentation." His face lit up. "Really? Thank you, Dr. Whitmore. Thank you so much." After he left, I sat alone in my office for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. Nancy had stolen my scholarship, but in doing so, she'd set me free. I'd returned as the professor she feared to face. But more than that, I'd returned as someone she could never be, someone who'd earned every single thing she had, someone who'd been broken and had rebuilt herself into something stronger, sharper, better, someone who didn't need revenge because she'd already won. I looked at the photograph on my desk again. Me in Berlin, triumphant, surrounded by people who respected my work, my mind, my achievements. That person, Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, was who I'd always been meant to become. Nancy had just forced me to find her sooner. I opened my laptop, pulled up the conference presentation, and got back to work. Outside, the sun was setting over the quad, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Students laughed and argued and rushed to class. Life continued, indifferent to old grievances and ancient wounds. And I was finally, truly free.